Around 9 p.m., Ajika A.J. Owens, a mother of 4, was shot and killed by an unidentified woman in Ocala, Florida. According to civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who is now representing the Owens family, A.J.'s children, who are 3 to 12 years old, were playing in a field next to an apartment complex when a 58-year-old white woman allegedly began yelling at them to get off her land and calling them racial slurs. According to Crump's statement, the children left, but accidentally left behind an iPad, which the woman took. When one of the kids tried to retrieve it, the woman threw it, hitting the boy and cracking the screen. Ms. Owens walked across the street to speak to the woman. But Crump's office says when she knocked on the door, the neighbor allegedly shot her through the closed front door. The bullet hole is shown here in photos provided by Crump's law firm. Owens was shot and later pronounced dead at the hospital. The shooter responsible has not yet been identified, arrested, or charged.
All right, what's good, everyone? It's Nigel here, Trinidad and Tobago Network. So, listen, we've talked about this before. Those of you who are avid viewers of 10, we've talked about this before. And listen, what's happening in Venezuela right now is headline news, and we will get back to that at some point. But let's talk about Stand Your Ground. Let's talk about SYG. That's being debated again in Parliament in Trinidad and Tobago. So, what we're dealing with here, 10, is a dangerous idea in my opinion, being pushed into our laws under the banner of security or national security. Now, Stand Your Ground is the new government bill being pushed through Parliament. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it again. Let's dissect it. And today we're going to deal with facts, not emotion. You have to take your emotion out of this when we talk about this. Now, both policies are being sold as solution to crime, or this policy is being sold as a solution to crime. But the evidence, 10, is clear. They do not reduce crime. In fact, they do the opposite. They increase homicide. They also empower fear and destabilize societies. That's a fact. And every country, 10, every country that copied this playbook, starting with the United States, deeply regrets it. So let's break it down. Like I said, we have to deal with facts here. We have to put emotion to the side when we talk about Stand Your Ground laws. Because what Trinidad is doing is going even further, in my opinion. This is not just Stand Your Ground here. This is the privatization of violence. And it's being pushed, for me, it's being pushed into a society with deep historical fears, with deep ethnic tensions, and of course, deep political insecurities. So again, I want to break this down in a way that's factual. Emotion has to go to the side here. Let's break it down factually and truthfully. Because if you bring emotions into this, everyone would be on the side of Stand Your Ground. Of course, a man or woman has the right to protect their property. But this does not reduce crime. 10. The United States is the birthplace of Stand Your Ground. So you would think, being the birthplace of it, you would think the results are, of course, positive. It's a good thing. In reality, the peer-reviewed research shows the absolute opposite. Every research done shows the opposite. You have JAMA, which is the Journal of American Medical Association. They found that Stand Your Ground laws increase homicides by 7 to 11%. You have RAND, the RAND Corporation. They found that Stand Your Ground produces more violence, not less. More violence, not less. This is facts we're dealing with here, 10. As we do here, we're dealing with facts, not emotions and feelings. The Texas A&M University, they found Stand Your Ground leads to a rise in unjustified killings. A rise in unjustified killings. You also have the American Bar Association. They concluded that Stand Your Ground makes the justice system more unequal and more deadly. There's not a single, and this is the most important thing I would say today. If you take anything away from this video, take this away. There is not a single major study that says Stand Your Ground reduces crime. Not a single major study that says Stand Your Ground reduces crime. So what is this about? If it's not about reducing crime, what is it about, 10? Why are we importing a failed US policy when America itself is moving away from it? It's a failed policy. I sometimes feel anything that comes from America to Trinidadians, it must be good. It's American, it's Yankee, it speaks in an accent, so it must be good. We must get ahead out of this mental slavery we still live with today. And 10, this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. But we have to speak honestly. We have to be honest and truthful, and of course, factual. That's all we do here on 10, of course. Like and subscribe to Trinidad Empowerment Network. So stand your ground magnifies fear. That's a fact. And fear in any society is not neutral. Remember that. It follows stereotypes. It follows stereotypes. Hear me here, 10. It follows history and it follows racial perception. Understand this. It follows racial perception. We know about Trayvon Martin. If you don't, Google it. So here are the verified facts, 10. And stay with me to the end. Like and subscribe. White shooters killing black victims are 10 times more likely to be found justified, understand your ground. To be found not guilty, understand your ground. Understand your ground. However, black shooters killing white victims almost never receive stand your ground protection. That is another fact coming from the birthplace of Stand Your Ground, the United States. Stand Your Ground states see more black men killed. They see more black men killed even when unarmed. Trayvon Martin being the most infamous case. George Zimmerman is still walking free. Stand Your Ground does not create racism, 10. It magnifies the deadly consequences of existing bias. Are you still with me? Are you hearing what I'm putting down here? You know the racial dynamics in Trinidad and Tobago right now, unfortunately. This is not opinion I'm giving you, 10. I'm giving you facts, not feelings, facts. These are the results from the Urban Institute. These are the results from the Texas A&M. These are the results from the ABA task force and multiple US state level reviews. I'm bringing you the facts today, 10. So anyone that's coming to you with feelings and emotion, you can tell them the facts shows you something different. When you legalize lethal force based on perception of threat, when you legalize force based on perception of threat, the group our society is most afraid of becomes who? This is the American reality. The groups the society becomes afraid of becomes who? And Trinidad is not immune to these same psychological patterns. I'm being careful with how I'm putting this, 10. Trinidad is not immune from the same psychological patterns. We see the racial dynamics happening here in Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad is a multi-ethnic society with a long history of mistrust, with a long history of political tribalism. You know this. With a long history of fear between groups. That is our reality. And when fear exists, laws, hear me here, 10, when fear exists, laws like Stand Your Ground does not calm that fear. It doesn't calm that fear. It weaponizes it. It weaponizes it. Because Stand Your Ground, 10, gives legal power, not based on actual danger, but how dangerous you feel someone else is to you. Are you hearing me here, 10? Are you listening to me? I hope you're hearing what I'm putting down. In a country with racial stereotypes, economic inequality, and political division, this Trinidad Empowerment Network is a recipe for disaster worse than what we see in America. We already have cases where people respond violently out of pure fear. Out of fear. Not actual threat, but fear. Stand Your Ground will turn those fear into legally protected killings. And the last thing we need in Trinidad and Tobago is more killings, 10. So we have to think about this. And I understand the emotional side. I understand the government has failed. I understand the policing has failed in Trinidad. And the government is trying to give you an alternative, but they're putting their failure. They are putting their failure in your hand. Remember that. Now, independent Senator Dr. Marlene Attzs Attzs, gave us a warning, a clear warning. She called the home invasion bill the privatisation of violence and the outsourcing of the state's most sacred duty. And she's right. The state has failed in its duty, so it's outsourcing its duty to you, the public. This is what's happening here. She's absolutely right. When the state, has failed in its duty, it's now outsourcing the duty to civilians, to the members of the public. That is what this bill does. We have failed you. We have failed in our duties to protect you, so we're going to put the protection on you. It shifts responsibility. It shifts responsibility for safety from the state to frightened citizens. And that is, a recipe for disaster. It encourages untrained individuals to escalate violent encounters. Look at someone, you fear them, you pull your gun, you shoot them. It creates legal gray areas that will be exploited, absolutely exploited. It creates a legal gray area that will be absolutely exploited in Trinidad and Tobago. It happens in America right now. It turns ordinary citizens into frontline responders without training or oversight. The state has failed, so they're passing this on to you, the untrained citizens. So instead of building a competent police service, the state is pushing citizens to fight crime themselves. This is what's happening here, and you have to understand what's happening here. You have to take your emotion out of this and look at the facts like I've done today. This is not national security 10. This is a state failure disguised as empowerment. This is a state failure disguised as empowerment. And you feel empowered. You know, you give someone a gun, they feel bigger than they are. They feel stronger than they are. You go to the gym and you build some muscles, you feel bigger and stronger than you are. Stand your ground, 10. Stand your ground in the home invasion bill and not crime strategies. Please believe me on this. The facts, I've given you the facts. They are literally political strategies. This is literally political strategies. They target fear. They target fear. They target anger. They target division. And when that's rife, especially in Trinidad, it's rife in Trinidad, well, it's an easy political win. And in every society, I remind you, in every society where Stand Your Ground took hold, it was pushed the hardest, and remember this, it was pushed the hardest by groups who felt socially insecure. It was pushed by groups who feared physical disadvantage. It was pushed by groups who believe the state cannot protect us, so we must protect ourselves. I go back to telling you that this is a failure of the state and they're passing this on to you. This should not be happening. This should not be happening. And if you can make a case for why Stand Your Ground is a good thing, then it would not be based in facts. It would purely be based in emotion. Fear, being frightened is the fuel behind Stand Your Ground. And when fear meets a law that legitimizes deadly force, the group that society fears the most, becomes the victim. Black men in America. The biggest victims of Stand Your Ground are black men in America. The group that clearly society fears the most. This is why, like I said to you before, black Americans repeatedly become the casualties of SYG, of Stand Your Ground. This is why this bill is extremely dangerous for Afro-Trinidadian men. I'm talking facts here, 10. It's dangerous. It is dangerous based on the facts we see coming from America. So if the government truly wanted to reduce crime, as I said to you many, many times before, Stand Your Ground is not the way to go. If the government truly wants to reduce crime, you know what they need to focus on. I've talked about this numerous times here on 10. Rebuilding the police service. Totally rebuilding the police service. investing in intelligence and smarter detection. I'm only talking about the policing side here. I'm talking about the policing side here. I'm dealt with the root cause. I'm talked about the root cause. The police needs to tackle corruption from the ground up, from the top down, corruption. Of course, 10, we need to address youth unemployment. That is one of the key issues here. We need to address youth unemployment, middle age unemployment. We need to address unemployment in Trinidad and Tobago, full stop. We need to address the mental health issues we face in Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, we need to invest in communities, heavily invest in communities. We need to make stronger our borders, of course, and port security. We need to stop guns from coming into Trinidad. The vast majority of the guns in Trinidad and Tobago, by the way, are made, of course, in the United States. But instead, what we have is the reach for the American playbook because it is politically convenient. Even though the results, like I said to you, are catastrophic. So I'd conclude by saying this. I won't take much more of your time. Thank you for staying tuned if you have. It's a bit of a long one today. But it's important. Trinidad does not need stand your ground. The facts doesn't align. Trinidad does not need privatized violence. Trinidad does not need stand your ground. The facts just does not align with reality. So if you're talking feelings, and emotions, then yeah, you would be in favor of stand your ground. But if we're talking about reducing crime, then the facts doesn't add up. And I've given you the facts. Trinidad does not need privatized violence. We do not, that's the last thing we need. Trinidad needs a functioning state. We need a functioning state. So as we look at this home invasion bill and the stand your ground mentality, we have to ask ourselves one simple question. Well, there are several questions we can ask, but for me, there's one pertinent question we have to ask ourselves looking at this bill. And do we want a society driven by fear? Do we want a society driven by fear or a society built on justice, competence, and accountability? Because fear is what's driving this stand your ground bill. And you could criticize me and say, who are you? Who are you to tell us what we need and what we don't need? I'm not telling you what you want or what you need or what you don't need. I'm giving you the facts as I do here on 10. And the facts doesn't align with reality. Because once you turn frightened citizens into armed responders, the damage 10 cannot be undone. The damage cannot be undone. So that's how I'd conclude today's video. This is Trinidad Empowerment Network. Stay informed, stay sharp, and stay empowered. Like and subscribe. Look after each other. Look out for my next video. I'm going to dive back into this Venezuela situation. It appears Trump is holding off for a minute, and he's holding off for good reason. I believe he's only holding off because he wants to see what happens to the files, the Epstein files. I believe this is how sadistic this human being is. He's waiting to see what happens to the Epstein file when he does release it. And I can't say anything. I cannot say I guarantee you, but I feel like once the file gets released, it's going to be headline news, and he will deflect the news by dropping bombs potentially in Venezuela. It's just my opinion at this stage. It's not based in anything other than my opinion. But I believe he's waiting this out until the Epstein files are fully released, and maybe he will then try to do something to take the news away from the files by doing something in Venezuela. But let's see how things transpire. So again, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on my next video. For now, much love, God bless, take care, look after each other, peace.